Back. EcoRI, are they in the house? Eco! Eco! Come on out. Yeah, that's right. How are you?
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Listen, it's a busy week in the environmental world this past week.
Yep.
Tim was on a week ago, and I thought we had a good discussion about Invenergy, and now there's more on Invenergy just from last Friday. Do you want to give the highlights?
Yeah, I mean, the story it's taken so many twists and turns since Invenergy proposed this power plant in Burrowville. And the latest is that the Narragansett tribe has agreed to be a backup water supplier for the power plant, which would need about 15,000 gallons of water a day. So they would be drawing, if called upon, from an aquifer all the way down in Hopkinton, and then trucking the water up to Burrowville. So this was a hurdle for Invenergy. They needed to have a water supplier, a backup water supplier in place, and now they have it. So the process is just going to keep moving forward, from what I understand.
That seems like a lot of environmental impact of trucking water from one end of the state literally to the other. I mean, almost the entire length of the state. What's the impact on that? And does that literally, because of the environmental impact, potentially change the entire review process?
That is an interesting question. I don't know if at this point it changes the review process, because Invenergy or the original proposal was for, I think it was 1 million gallons of water. They scaled back the design to rejigger the cooling system to require less water, and so that's been reviewed already. And now the fulfillment they had to prove was that they had a backup water supplier to cool the plant. And with this, I mean, they fulfill that checkbox. So, and the impact of trucking all that water across the state, I mean, it's natural gas it's a cleaner form of energy. However, when you're talking about trucks on the road bringing gallons of water, across the state,
right,
it's a little bit absurd.
Right. I remember the New York Times did a Sunday cover piece a few years ago looking at organics in places like Whole Foods, and when you looked at the impact of the transportation infrastructure of bringing organic kiwis from New Zealand, and looking at the implications of what that organic product was, I think it was shocking for many who thought they were trying to do the right thing for their own personal health and for the environment, and in fact, no, the global carbon impact was absurdly disproportionate to eating a kiwi.
Yeah, like everything, you have to look at the entire calculation. Local, conventional versus organic, if it's coming from Australia. Yeah.
Right. Maybe we'll skip kiwis this season. Next is a major, significant, and is it the last big chance for the public coming up in 2 weeks in Burrowville for that public hearing?
I don't know if it's the last chance, but there certainly has been a lot of opportunity for public input during this whole process. Whether that input has been really heard by the decision makers, unclear. I mean, it's gotten a lot of press coverage, and I think the public is very active on this issue. So we're definitely going to be watching that public hearing.
We've had 3 major hurricanes in the United States and its territories over the past month or so, and the devastation has been mammoth. There's lots of arguments if they've been exacerbated by global warming or not, or whether it's a lot of bad building and a lot of lack of zoning, or a combination thereof. And some scientists, even who are concerned about global warming, can't nail down whether these were exacerbated by water temperatures and things like that. Here in Rhode Island, are we taking these hints serious enough? Are we thinking about these issues? Are we moving on these issues? And are we even remotely ready for if we got hit with a category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane in this region?
I don't think anyone's ever ready for a Cat 5, but I think Rhode Island is, this is an area where the state is leading. I know in Cranston there's a retreat from the floodplain where the state is buying back homes, and people are moving away from that flood zone that was so heavily impacted
5,
in
6 years
2010.
ago? Yeah, 6, 7 years
Yeah,
ago.
so, Rhode Island has 400 miles coastline, and so it's obviously very vulnerable. It's still desirable to live on the coast. You look at also the industrial zone in South Providence. That's right. That's right there. If that takes a hit, I mean, that's big trouble for the city. So, there's a lot of work to be done, but Rhode Island is definitely thinking about this, and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has been a leader on bringing that to the attention.
And are we seeing, this, I talked to Tim a little bit about, the environment ebbs and flows as a top 5 issue in people's mind. This year was there was some positive, I think, legislation relative to renewables and some energy usage issues, but simultaneously you had one of the biggest rate increases going on. Do we have a functional environmental policy in Rhode Island? Listen, we're at a lot of press conferences, we're monitoring a lot of things. It just doesn't seem like there's a big banging of the drums from leaders at the statewide level. More so at the federal level, but at the state level, do you get a sense of we're there, we're getting there, we've even got a plan to get there?
I think the state was devastated by the recession, and I think we're still crawling out from under that, and there's still this emphasis on jobs, and there isn't a way that anyone's really linked economic health with environmental health. Although in our reporting it's one of the things that we follow. But it's jobs. A lot of time that has to do with construction, and that's often at loggerheads with conservation and environmental concerns. So, not a lot of real leadership. There are bills that have passed, like you mentioned, the renewable energy. So there are little peaks here and there, but really right now it's all about economics and job growth.
Jobs. Yeah, right.
Especially with the governor's race coming up.
Yeah. So we're getting into, we're really, we're almost at the governor's 1,000th day. That is now a new mantra in Rhode Island, and everybody will be doing some level of analysis. And in addition, it's going to be an incredible political season. It seems like everybody is vulnerable and everyone is running for office. Is there a strategy, by the environmental community to try and push their agenda to be an important one? Do you get that sense as being the state's leading environmental news organization that there's a concerted effort?
Well, you're going to have Mr. Roselli on after me, I believe, and I know that he has been a real advocate for environmental issues and an opponent of the Burrillville power plant. So that perhaps might galvanize the movement. There are organizations like Save the Bay and Audubon and the Nature Conservancy, those bigger organizations that have had a lot of input, but there's, we didn't see a Green candidate or a Dem who was had a strong stance on environmental issues in the last cycle.
No, it's a remarkable period of time. You're seeing probably the biggest rollback of environmental regulatory issues at the national level under Administrator Pruitt and the Trump administration. And certainly Democrats, our own delegation is making some noise, but they're not laying down on the railroad tracks blocking the train. And Rhode Island, if you're going to be a tourism state, you've got to be an environmental state, because people don't go to ugly places and spend $400 a night. You've got to be, in Narragansett Bay and Newport and what's going on in Providence and wherever South County is totally dependent on quality of life and on the quality of the environment. But the lack of discussion of some of these issues is really remarkable.
Yeah, it is. And, again, it's that link between the economy and the environmental health of the state, which, you mentioned it's beaches, it's beautiful places, it's boating and fishing. If we're not dealing with stormwater runoff issues and the bay is polluted, then, not many people are going to want to come through Rhode Island. So, there's a link there.
Yeah, in the late 80s, early 90s, really all the way through the 90s up to the 2000s, on a regular basis, when we had 2-year bond issues or 4-year bond issues, there was always a substantial effort to buy more farmland, preserve more open space. And gosh, you don't hear a word about that on anybody's political agenda right now.
Yeah, well, the green bonds are always very popular and they always pass by a very wide margin. So there is a public will to preserve what we have, and there was a green bond on the ballot in the last election cycle that did pass. So that's a bright spot, and that's an area where environmental groups can really galvanize their base to come together to do the work of preserving open space and farmlands.
What else do we need to know coming up this week? We're going to see a big debate on Invenergy in 2 weeks. We're out of the legislative session, but we're definitely into the all-out and the political fun season. Is the environmental community looking at things like Wexford? Are they looking at things like the Pawsox Stadium? Are they?
That kind of falls into smart growth, and Frank Carini, our editor, has written a lot about this, about building the right thing in the right place. And I think, the Wexford facility, that's kind of considered infill. It's being built downtown. So, from an environmental standpoint, that it's not unlike the Citizens move to the woods in Johnston. It's not requiring the leveling of forest, and so, from an environmental perspective, I'd say that's, a lower impact building than, some of the other facilities that we've seen built.
Have you guys looked at Amazon's HQ2 at all?
Well, we haven't reported on it, but it is stunning to me, just the amount of scraping and groveling that's being done across the nation to get Amazon to locate.
It just reminds me of especially the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, when the golden ticket is in a candy bar. These cities and towns racing for it, because it may be the only time you could ever accomplish something like this all in one fell swoop. There's never been a company to say, we're coming and we're going to bring 50,000 jobs.
Yeah, I look at that from two perspectives. 50,000 jobs is huge, but then I think, how many small businesses has Amazon, put out? Benny's, how many jobs are lost there? And so, again, it's a calculation. 50,000 jobs sounds great, but at what cost? So I don't know what the answer is. I really don't, but we certainly are making a play for Amazon here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can't tell we are, to be perfectly honest. Okay. I think we're going through the motions to some degree based on what we're able to determine, because you have to go through it. But the amount of, in comparison to what you see in other cities where they're literally bringing people together, they're sending people out to Seattle, they're about 8 miles ahead of where we are. And it seems like, we're downloading the application and we're sending it in because it's like a common app for college application, and you got to send one into Harvard because your parents make you. But you have no chance of getting in with those SAT scores.
Wow, you just described my high school career.
And everybody else's, except for Kate Nichols. So thanks as always. This was great. Always appreciate when you guys come in. I think appreciate all your journalism. You guys really are, you own that space. We depend on you. We look to your leadership. It's really an important area. I think back, we had the story a couple weeks ago about the Providence Journal being down to 16 reporters. When I worked in environmental policy and I worked on issues for John Chafee on environmental issues, there were, you could say 5, 6 full-time environmental reporters. Bob Wiss on air issues, Peter Lord on land issues, Bob Fredrickson, You know, there was just a plethora of smart environmental journalists, and you know, now there's not even a beat. And you guys have done a beautiful job filling that void, and I think everybody appreciates
Oh,
it.
thank you.